I think I'm live. I think I'm live. Welcome to another. I don't know if I want to call this Wednesday night fights, but this is like Saturday legal talk. My name is Nate, the lawyer. That's right, Nate, the lawyer. And today I have my regular two compadres with me: Legal Bites and Uncivil Law, making it
Hello,
happen
hello.
again. Now, since last week, a lot has happened in the past 7 days. I'm talking about we got the cheerleaders, we got the
Britney
Supreme Court
Spears.
Save
throwing
the
it,
cheerleader, save the world.
everything. Yeah, we have everything going on. So, I put like a list of topics out, but I don't think we're gonna get through them all. Let's just jump right into it while we have some time. Britney Spears, conservatorship, legal bites. Let us know what's going on.
Yep. So, as anyone who has followed Britney Spears at all remotely since 2008 knows, she's been under a conservatorship since about 2008, since she had her very, very public mental health breakdown due to all of the stresses that she had in her life. And her father was made the conservator. And so since then, she's basically been under the control of her father. That's been very controversial, and there's been the Free Britney movement that has followed with that, and has really blown up, especially in recent years. And so she just today had a hearing in Los Angeles County Superior Court, where she actually finally decided that she wanted to address the court. Now, she's always remained super silent about this conservatorship, even though she's has a presence on social media. And that's kind of one of the reasons why this Free Britney movement has really taken off, is really because of her silence. People are thinking that even her social media is being controlled by other people, et cetera, et cetera. So now there was a lot of anticipation about this court hearing where she wanted to address the court. No one quite knew exactly what she was going to say, if it was just about the fact that she didn't want her father to be conservator, because there have been indications that she was afraid of him, for example, or if she was going to say outright that she did not want to be under a conservatorship at all. So that actually is ultimately what happened today, was that she addressed the court. She said, I don't think I should be under a conservatorship. I think that this is really hampering my life. I want to have more children, but I'm being forced to have an IUD as part of this conservatorship.
Really?
Yep. That was part of her remarks to the court. And the thing that's like really unusual about this whole thing is that normally a conservatorship, generally speaking, exists over people that are of a certain age. These are people that, generally speaking, have dementia, Alzheimer's. They can't take care of themselves, and they haven't set up any sort of a process for them under a power of attorney or advanced healthcare directive. That's the non-court way that people will usually deal with those kinds of issues as they age. And so when people don't have those kind of documents set up, then sometimes they need a guardianship or a conservatorship, depending on what the state calls it. Different states are a little bit different. But this case is so incredibly unusual because she is so young. And so there's been a lot of speculation as to her health, her mental health, what kind of issues she's actually dealing with. Her dad even made a suggestion over the last month that she may have had early onset dementia, which is a possibility that does exist. And it is a possibility that she could have something like that. But no one knows unless they actually have access to her medical file. And this has all been incredibly private. So that was the longest explanation I think I've ever given on this live stream. But basically, that's where we're at. Oh, Nate, you're muted.
Yeah, I remember back when she shaved her head when the father first got the conservatorship. Now, it's been on for like, 13, 14 years, right? It's been on for a while now, right?
Yeah.
So now she's actually wanting to be free. So she's 39 years old. Now, I know she doesn't have to have custody of her kids. Her former husband has that custody,
Yes.
right?
I think so, yes.
So she is, I hate to say this, it seems like she may be mentally unstable, and doctors have found her to be mentally unstable. That's the reason why you had the conservatorship for all that time.
Yes.
So is there any evidence that she's recovered, that, she's medically capable? Because, this could be a ruse from somebody who still is sick, even though, I'm not saying that she is, but,
right.
How do we know, what are the medical professionals saying?
So I don't know. That has been all closed out from the media. The whole case has been pretty much sealed from the public for this reason, is to maintain a sense of privacy. At least that's what we've been told. I mean, it could also be that there are more nefarious reasons for why it's been shielded from the public. But I mean, no one knows until we actually find out what that information is, and we may never know. But I will say that I have worked in this area of law, and I have worked in LA as well. And I know that I've been in front of this judge before. This is Judge Brenda Penny. I don't remember anything too particular about this judge, which leads me to believe that she's a fairly competent judge overall. So I know that there's a lot of people in the Free Britney movement that have said that she's a corrupt judge, probably. She's, it's like everyone involved in this case that's been involved in holding this conservatorship in place is obviously corrupt and obviously trying to live off of Britney's payroll. And, it's you really have to be very deep into a conspiracy theory to really believe all of that, or not really understand enough or be familiar enough with the process to really know how to sort of see what's right and what's wrong in this kind of a process. But generally speaking, when it comes to a conservatorship, it is very difficult usually to take a conservatorship away after it's been put in place. But in this case, it was apparently a voluntary conservatorship, meaning that she agreed to go into it ultimately. So I've never. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it's funny because to me that seems like a catch-22. If someone if somebody's mentally unfit to make decisions for themselves, then how can they agree to give up their rights to let somebody else? You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Exactly, because this is all 100% about competency, right? And that is the hardest thing in this area of law, because a lot of these cases where you're trying to figure out if someone properly created a trust or should be under a conservatorship, we're talking about whether or not they are competent enough to make decisions for themselves. And so you're right, it is this weird catch-22 where someone is competent enough to agree to a conservatorship or competent enough to hire counsel, or not competent enough to hire their own counsel. And so in this particular case, Britney's current attorney was court appointed. She actually tried to hire her own attorney, but they determined that she wasn't competent enough to hire her own. It was a whole thing. Yeah.
Well, it seems like, what do you think about this mess, Kurt?
It seems so bizarre to me, because you have this person who is a performer, and obviously to be able to perform requires a whole bunch of skills to be able to put together. And to simultaneously say this person is so incompetent that they can't hire their own lawyer, they can't make their own decisions about family planning. It's just something about that just seems inopposite to me that doesn't quite make sense in my head. So that's the thing I always wondered about. How can you simultaneously say that this person can, tour around the world, hold a conservatorship in Las Vegas, do these shows every night, that require putting together, performance and timeliness, and she's obviously able to get through them and please an audience, and yet she is so incompetent. There's something very odd to my mind.
Yeah. Although my one, I guess, sort of rebuttal to that point is that we do also have child performers. And, as we know, children under 18 are not competent to make decisions for themselves either. However, Britney Spears was one of them. She was able to perform and have a series of gigs that she was able to do as a kid. And sometimes they're put through grueling processes too. But I completely understand. I mean, this is what I think most reasonable people looking at the situation are thinking of, is the fact that she obviously is able to handle a certain level of I don't know, stress, I guess, in her life for performing and all this other stuff like that that's related to that. But Yeah, it's a
maybe it's
very strange case.
maybe it's a tortured genius kind of thing, but it's like you're basically telling me that one of the most successful artists in the world is incompetent. I mean, what does that say for the rest of us who apparently are competent and not as successful?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's something weird.
But
Yeah.
today, the big hoo-ha today is because she gave a statement, right? First time she spoke to the court, saying that she's sad every day. She wants to be free from the conservatorship.
Mhm.
She's has all this mental turmoil and so forth and so forth. So if that's accurate, I feel for her, but at the end of the day, it's still I don't know. It's like a weird thing because sure, I would say I want anybody to be free and to be able to make their own free decisions, but on the back end, I don't want to just jump to the gun and say this is somebody who's well enough to make these decisions and they're not. You know what I mean?
This reminds me why I noped out of family law in the first place, to be quite honest. I noped out of family law so hard. As much respect as I have for our judicial system, maybe not quite as much for the family courts. It's like I don't trust them because the standards are more loose and more emotional, less rule based. So I'm not sure I trust the results coming out of this system.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I've just with my experience having worked some cases, I mean, there's really no case that's very similar to this because, like I said, it's such a unique case, just given her age and her I guess status in life as an otherwise able-bodied working person.
You're a California lawyer. Represent me. I want to intervene.
I mean, are you an interested party? Do you have some sort of financial interest in her estate?
I'm sure I could conjure something together.
It's such a crazy unique case. But I think that a lot of people have this sort of knee-jerk reaction because conservatorships, I think, a lot of people don't necessarily know very much about conservatorships. They may not have had as much experience with them. And so it really offends a lot of people's sense of independence and freedom, and a right to determine your own life, But conservatorships play a very valuable role in our society because they also protect a lot of very vulnerable people. Elder abuse is a huge problem in this country and probably outside the United States too. So and especially since COVID has happened. I mean, during the pandemic, elder abuse apparently has gone up, just like a lot of different forms of abuse have. So conservatorships on their own are not a bad thing. Like, I really don't think that people should walk away with that. And in this case, for Britney Spears, it might not be a bad thing either. She may not want it even necessarily, but if it's something that's necessary, then it's necessary. If it's actually ultimately better for her overall, health and welfare and well-being, then I mean it's not something that should be ended very like willy-nilly,
Yeah. Definitely. But again, I think because now my question is just like about the movement, the Free Britney movement, right? I understand naturally the natural reaction is free her, give her everything, she's a 39-year-old woman. But then it's kind of like on the back end, I feel like I don't have enough data to jump on either side either way. And I know people will be like, you should be on the side of freedom all the time, but I don't want to give somebody who's not able to take care of themselves that type of freedom, because that would be irresponsible. And it does, like thinking about even the fact that she doesn't have custody of her children and the reasons why she doesn't have custody of her children, that makes it all kind of, when you look at the totality of the circumstances, it's just making me less likely to jump on the bandwagon than not. You know what I mean? To end this, what do you think, Kurt? Do you think free Britney, or do you not have enough information yet?
I'd like to think that someone somewhere really thinks that the conservatorship is really the right thing to do, and I think your note of caution is warranted. But I was just thinking to myself, since I'm still sane enough to be able to express a preference for myself, it's like I don't know, man. If they ever, whatever value conservatorships might have for other people, it's like if you ever tried to come after me, I don't know, man. It's like I value my independence way too much. So I can totally understand someone making a rational choice that they'd rather be free, no matter what other consequences may befall. It reminds me a little bit of some of the Supreme Court's cases dealing with the ability of self-representation and the ability of someone to fight the state. I'm trying to remember the right case, but there's these great lines from the Supreme Court about the ability of someone to fight the government and deny the plea, and that the sting of the guilty verdict may to some person be worse than the conviction of death. You know, that even if it means I'm going to get the death penalty, that it might be worse to someone to be forced to confess something they didn't do. And it's like, at least I'm free to make that choice. You know, and there's language from the Supreme Court that kind of goes to that point. It's like, you know, maybe there is something there at that end of that rainbow that really does make sense after all.
Hey, it's yeah. I don't know. It's always a tangle.
It may not be wise. It may not be prudent. It may not be, you know, pragmatic. But, you know, maybe at the end, maybe I'm free, and that's what really matters. Reminds me of a line from a movie where it's like, you know, they're waiting to be executed, and the guy says, you know, like how you die or how you're going to fall matters. And the response is, you know, when the fall is all that's left, it matters quite a big deal.
It's funny. I used to always tell my uncle, he always complained about being at the bottom. Hey, I'm at the bottom. I was like, well, if you're at the bottom, there's nowhere else to go but up. And he was like, shit, hell, I've been on the bottom so long, it's starting to look like the top. I was like, all right, you know.
I'm pulling my Braveheart over here, yelling freedom as they're tearing away my entrails. You know, that's kind of where I'm. Let's go for broke.
I will say that on the note about, you know, maintaining and preserving, you know, one's freedom in light of conservatorships and all this stuff. Of course, we never give legal advice on any of our channels ever. But for anyone that is alarmed by the prospect of conservatorships, there is a thing called a power of attorney and an advanced medical directive. And if you have those two documents filled out properly and you've done them and you are able to actually make decisions for yourself while you are competent to prevent a guardianship or a conservatorship or guardianship from happening. So that is just a thing that exists that people can, you know, look into if they want to avoid a guardianship.
Now from California, we're headed over to Stratton, PA, right?
Yes,
your wonderful cheerleader.
Yep.
So
from a woman who's incompetent to a woman who's the most competent of us all.
So the Supreme Court ruled on our favorite case, which we listened to oral arguments on. You know, and just, you know,
best rebuttal ever.
Just the quick TLDR of what happened in this case. So we have this young lady who's 16-year-old. So we have this 16-year-old. I think she was 14 at the time or something like that. But anyway,
I believe she's graduated at this point.
Yeah, she's graduated. So. It's over. So she was going out for the varsity cheerleading team. She didn't make the team. She made JV. So while on the JV team on a weekend, when she was at home on the weekend, not at school grounds, she sent the Snapchat to her friends over her private phone saying, F cheer, F school, F everybody. And that was it, right? Now, Snapchat is a system that's supposed to hold that for a couple of minutes. People see it, and then it's gone. One of the mom of another student who got it, who happens to be on the team, a coach of the team, she sees it, shows it to the administration. They suspend this girl from the JV squad for the rest of the year for, you know, conduct unbecoming of a cheerleader. So she's gone for gone for a year.
It's the UCMJ applied
which model rule is that again?
So she's gone. They told her, you know, she's lucky she didn't get suspended. So her father goes to the ACLU. They say what happened. They said, well, she's off campus. She was off school grounds, not doing it on the weekend. Okay, let's take it to court. So then it went to the district court. District court sided with her. She's off school. School has no jurisdiction. Then it went to the appeals court. Appeals court virtually said the same thing. Off campus, after school hours, no school event, right? You know, they can't regulate. Goes up to the Supreme Court. And that's what happened today. We get an 8-1 decision that affirmed the lower court's ruling, but kind of limited it and said, well, they went too far and we're going to readdress it. Now I'm going to throw it to Kurt because Kurt knows what's up.
Justice Breyer. Oh, man. So, yeah, this is written by Justice Breyer, who writes this really wishy-washy. Oh, yeah, no, he stayed way too long at the fair, man. Yeah. She writes this really wishy-washy opinion with this 3-part test that it just spurns litigation. There's these 2 distinct paragraphs and then the 3-part test. And I was commenting on stream. I was like, I can already see the next 30 lawsuits. I can already see 30 decisions from courts of appeal in my mind on basically all these issues that you're just basically giving it to the schools and giving it to the things on what to fight for. So you can just see the tentacles of litigation spurning in a very sort of concrete way that you don't normally get, which is very amusing to me. Well,
Kirk, can I give people the 3-part test so they know what we're talking about?
Sure.
All right. So the first part of the test is whether it's on or off campus. If it's off campus, then it's generally the parents have the responsibility of discipline at that point. But that's generally. So first, whether it's on and off campus. If it's off campus, then you have to see what type of speech you're talking about. Religious speech and political speech that's off campus, then generally you're going to need a high burden. It's going to be very hard for schools to regulate that. And speech that doesn't have anything to do with the school function and not like related to school activity or a core school value. For instance, if I give you a take-home test and that take-home test, I say, well, you can't speak to anybody else. And then you speak to someone else. That can be regulated by the school.
Right.
Because it's part of a core school function. Or if you're at a school event, like a school basketball game or something, that's related to a core school function.
That makes sense.
So they said those things could be regulated, but if it's outside of those things then they're going to have a really high reason or a high the burden is going to be, they're going to have a high burden on why they want to regulate speech outside of either a school program or school activity. And the last is that to understand that the First Amendment protects unpopular speech. And they use this line, which I like, but I'm like, all right, it's not really a test, but it's just a saying. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend it to the death, saying that, things like criminal stuff, harassment, cyberbullying, and all that stuff, those are exceptions to this rule. But you can have offensive stuff and things that make people feel uncomfortable. That doesn't mean you can regulate them under, the state can regulate them. So that was kind of how I got the 3-part test. Am I wrong, Kurt, or would I get it wrong?
No, you're fine. It's just all the qualification languages is just funny because they talk about generally speaking and rarely and cautiously, and it's just all this qualified language all over the place. And it's like, oh my, we're uncertain of the test that will lead to a list of activities. I'm like, well, guess what's happening now.
So, Alina, do you think the court got it right?
So, to be honest, I hadn't read the opinion yet, but that breakdown of the 3-part test sounds, it kind of sounds reasonable. But if it is the way that Kurt is saying it is, really what the Supreme Court needs to do is introduce a test that is applicable, that other the courts of appeal and district courts can apply, and then ultimately expand upon if they need to. But if there are as many qualifiers as he says there are, then that may or may not be a good thing.
Me reading through this, I like reading through the opinion. It seemed to me the court was trying to create a rule that allows a cheerleader to blow off some steam, FU, FGR, everything. Yeah. But on the opposite side, still allow room where if that cheerleader said, I'm going to kill the cheerleading coach, then okay, that's something that you can protect. That's something. So it's trying to walk that fine line. You're going to have a lots of generalities, maybes, alsos, because there's not really a bright line rule. And the court actually rejected the bright line rule because I thought the Third Circuit's bright line rule, well, it wasn't a bright line rule. I thought the Third Circuit got it right, but they thought the Third Circuit's rule was too broad. Am I wrong, Kurt?
Yeah, I thought the Third Circuit had it better. I didn't think there was
Yeah.
as much conflict between the Third Circuit and the Supreme Court as the Supreme Court seemed to think. The Supreme Court seemed to think there was more conflict between them and the Third Circuit than I thought. And I thought the Third Circuit was a lot cleaner because they're like tinker on campus, tinker not off campus. So that was that bright line rule. But it wasn't bright line because it then went on to say, or it went on to imply that in the case of some specifically defined rules that maybe we could just analyze on traditional freedom of speech grounds, like strict scrutiny, like bullying, for example.
Yeah.
It's like we can have something specifically. The problem you want to solve is bullying. Okay, let's have a specifically defined rule about specifically what is bullying, and look at that regulation unto itself. Because we can have the more general disruption of the school environment if it's done in school. That's tinker. But that general thing is not going to apply off campus. Now we need something more specific. So the problem is bullying? Great, let's go define some laws on bullying. The problem is, harassment? Great, let's go define some rules specifically on harassment. And then we can go play in those specific spaces. But this was, it was written by Breyer.
Yeah, well, what do you think about the dissent in the case? Because there was one dissent, and that was Justice Thomas. And this dissent was really about the mechanics of the relationship between student, teacher, and student parent. In other words, that the school administrators aren't really state actors, but some type of quasi parents. And in that role as like this quasi parent, the First Amendment doesn't reach them. But that just doesn't make sense because they are being paid by the state. They are state actors.
Right.
So so I don't understand his reasoning, but I understood where he was trying to go.
It just felt like it felt. I don't know. It felt a little bit off point, and it felt like an unnecessary chide. The entire dissent was, why didn't you spend more time talking about in loco parentis and trying to figure out what that is? And the rest of the Supreme Court's like, we just don't have to. We don't want to deal with that. We don't have to. But he's like, but at loco in parentis though. And it's like, go away, Justice Thomas. So it just wasn't maybe the right time for that case. But yeah, the idea of Justice Thomas's opinion was that the essentially in so many words, the idea seemed to be that at the founding, schools were standing in the stead of parents. So schools were not really governmental actors at all. They're basically private actors, despite that the government. And then Justice Thomas does note that at the time also there wasn't mandatory schooling, so that might change the analysis. It seemed like some musings for a law review article or something. It was a weird dissent. It's not even clear that he ultimately disagreed because he has this line of like, well, maybe the mandatory nature of it has changed, or maybe this aspect has changed. But it just seemed like let's thrash the Supreme Court for not discussing my pet issue more. I don't know.
It is a weird take. But hey, I think the court got it right. I don't know. Do you think the court got it right at the end, Alita?
I mean, yeah, I definitely think so. I think
because this is your prediction too. You predicted this outcome.
Yeah. I mean, because it would have set the stage for a tremendous amount of overreach if the court had sided with the school district because of the rules that they were trying to set up during the oral argument were. I mean, it basically would have been anything that is said over Snapchat or any form of social media about the school, or even, I mean, they probably would have tried to expand it even beyond that if it's other fellow students, getting into other controversies that have nothing to do with school. I don't know. I mean, there are ways that obviously bullying and things like that can be regulated by the school because of the way that it can impact schooling. But I mean, yeah, it would have set the stage for so much potential overreach by schools as another arm of the government over these kids that I just saw no way that the court would rule in favor of the school district in this case.
Yeah, I was pretty happy for the most part, despite my misgivings with the specific thing. I have a sneaking suspicion that what will probably happen is it'll mostly be ignored in the real world, that there'll be some attempts, but I'm not sure I think the real message is basically don't ever use these exceptions except in the most extreme cases. Yeah. So maybe all this will ultimately be ignored and it'll basically be like a bright line rule at the end anyway. So fine.
And I think more or less goes, off campus is really, it's not off limits, but you really have to have a good reason if you're going to bring some crap like this. And that seems where the Supreme Court was going with this.
Yeah.
But now, what do you guys think about our next case, the St. Louis couple, the McCloskeys? The gun-toting couple, Second Amendment, they now have pled guilty to more or less assault and harassment.
Right, which are misdemeanors, right?
Which are misdemeanors.
They were originally indicted for felonies, right?
Yes. But so everybody understands, the governor had already pre-planned and said, "Hey, you guys are getting a pardon. If you guys are now in Missouri, I believe they're in. The governor can't give these more or less pre-pardons, a pardon before a conviction. You have to get convicted, then they'll give you a pardon. So that seems to be what they were waiting for. So now that they have been convicted, the governor has now said he's going to, he's actually said 10 months ago that he was going to give them a pardon. First, do you think this was the right move for the McCloskeys to take this plea? Now, mind you, this plea seemed to be, there seemed to be a lot going in on this, because there are two things I think when you're talking about this plea you have to understand. Number one, they were pleading to lesser crimes. Number two, McCloskey even says that, yes, exactly what they charged him with is exactly what I did. They charged him with assault fear, and he intended to point the gun at the protesters to cause them fear and apprehension. So it was assault fear. It was with a weapon, and obviously it was a misdemeanor. But
and he said if I had a chance to do it again, I would do it again.
I would do it again.
He said that explicitly.
So it's not like he would. So we're saying he's guilty of assault. But so his argument wasn't really about the assault, but it was really about the justification. Their argument was that we were justified in the assault. So now with the plea bargain on the table, the guy's worth $50 million, so he has the money to fight it. Why not fight it? And if you lose that trial, you have a plea. You have a pardon anyway. Go ahead, Alita.
Well, because he's also said that he's going to run for Senate. So now he can use that into a political rallying cry, because if he had tried to fight against it and said, "Oh, no, I never intended, to strike any fear in anyone else," no, by taking the plea, he only gets a misdemeanor. He's going to get pardoned anyway. He pays a $750 fine. His wife pays a $2,000 fine, and then he can use that as a rallying cry at all of his rallies to run for Senate. And to say, like, yes, and I would do it all over again if I had the opportunity again. I mean, I don't necessarily. I mean, I have no idea if that's going to be a winning, platform.
But Alita, why not fight it then? Because I think the people who want you to fight it are going to be the people. He's running as a Republican, right? So this whole, this plea, it would have been better, like, if I'm a Republican and I see I'm fighting for the Second Amendment. My freedom's on the line, right? I'm running for my freedom. That's what I'm running for. I think that's a better message than, I pleaded guilty because I was, it's a little harder to swallow.
I don't know, because then on the other hand, you can say, like, look, the system's out to get us. The system got me. That's true. Good point. You could say I had, this was just the best option that I had was to just take the plea deal. So I don't know. I really think that he's able to use it as a rallying cry and able to, almost like turn themselves into sort of like political martyrs, almost, so to speak.
What do you think, Kurt?
Yeah, sounds about right. I hadn't really considered the political angles, but I think Alita's analysis is sharper than mine, so I'll just defer to her on this one. Yeah, she has it right. Hadn't really thought about that. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
running.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that he was going to be running for Senate, I was like, oh, okay, then that makes sense. I did see that one of the things that they had to do was to surrender all of their firearms, and then he turned around and bought a brand new one this week afterwards.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, I don't think they needed because to me it doesn't seem like it's about the money. It's just about, if it's about principle. I think you get more political points, especially with the voting public, the people who he's trying to get to vote for him. I think you get more of those people to vote for you if you're fighting the cause.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I also think there's a reality of it. You don't want to lose your law license. You don't want to go through the whole stress of getting convicted on felonies and have to lose your guns and all that stuff. So there is something. And Lloyd, I think they explained it right. You can still lose. You can lose any right to have weapons. Yeah, but the thing is that if you get a full pardon, an innocent pardon, then you don't have to worry because their conviction disappears. So I don't think you have to worry about losing your weapons. I think the fact that they supposedly had the full pardon, that changes the dynamic for me, because you got an automatic win. You fighting really doesn't mean anything at the end, because if you get the pardon and all the collateral, it's weird, because for those of you who don't know how pardons work, you can get a full pardon that more or less is like you're innocent and you get all your rights restored and everything, and then you can get a partial pardon where more or less you're still convicted, but they let you out early. It's really called a commutation. Then you get there's a whole bunch of it, but I'm assuming they would have gotten full pardons where they would have been walking free. But what's your take, Kurt?
Well, Nick said that the state pardon may not restore his federal gun rights, because the state pardon can only restore state rights, and the state conviction is a conviction that might not get your federal rights back. So I don't know how that plays or that interplays, but that was a factor that Nick was suggesting as well.
Well, I don't know. I would have to see, because if you're pardoned, let's say if you're innocent and you're pardoned for state crimes, that still would impede your federal, because the federal deprivation of rights is based on the state saying that you've done this. And now if you've been pardoned, then I don't see how that would work. Maybe I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Let me get the super chat. Just want to say I love your streams. I learn a lot from them, especially when y'all argue points. Thank you. Aw,
Hey.
Thank you. The conviction doesn't disappear potentially for federal purposes. I know the conviction doesn't disappear from the record, because even when I looked up, to show you how nerdy I am, I went and looked up the Bureau of I forget they call it corrections, but you can look it up. Missouri's pardon rules. You could actually look them up, and it tells you right there whether the rights under Missouri law get respawned, but it doesn't talk about the federal piece of it. Interesting. All right, so the McCloskeys are now done. Do we want to start talking about? We got to go back to our girl Tati Westbrook. Tati Westbrook. We got to go back to. She reappeared this week, right, in a new video.
Yep.
It wasn't a My Sister video. It was I Got Clark Swanson video, and she didn't mention Katie Jo Paulson. She didn't mention Without a Crystal Ball. She just looked very happy and very, very, very like we're about to get some money from Clark Swanson. So let me throw it to Kurt, since Kurt was following this case. What do you think about Tati West? Did you see her new video, or what do you think about her?
I did see it. I mean, it basically confirmed what we pretty much knew, that Swanson was involved as part of this Without a Crystal Ball, drama, and talking about being betrayed and all the rest of it. I mean, we kind of could see the motivation. Now, how much Swanson is involved and whether or not that's a problem for his legal case is a whole nother set of issues. But the idea that he was in some way a source or of information or financial seemed to be apparent, and that seems to now been confirmed by what Tati has to say. So, I found it very interesting, although not surprising, that the stress almost caused her to get divorced, and I was kind of happy that they were able to stick together. I'm a bit of a sucker for that the relationship should always work out in the end. So I was very happy to hear that they were able to muddle through. So, that was nice.
What do you think, Alita?
I completely echo that. I mean, litigation sucks in a lot of ways. I mean, when you're particularly when you're the client, I mean, that can cause all kinds of weird ways that stress can show up in your daily life when you are a client or a party to a lawsuit. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that she and her husband were dealing with issues related to all of that, because it was not just, just basic. I mean, the case Without a Crystal Ball was all about defamation, but I mean, with Swanson, and that all has to do with their livelihood. So that is really attacking their ability to obtain resources and live the life that they want to live. And that for a lot of people is, I mean, one of the most stressful kinds of litigation that you can go through. I mean, I've seen that with clients having been, terminated by their employers, and so in employment litigation, and that can cause all kinds of crazy stress. So that doesn't surprise me at all. But it definitely seemed like for her, the battle is still going on. There was still quite a bit that she was sort of like alluding to, but without really delving into it. That's absolutely her right, obviously. But I mean, it definitely seems like she is, at least she's gotten to a certain point where she can move forward with her life and move forward with her channel again, and hopefully sort of figure out a new path forward.
I found her comment at the end very interesting because she said that she didn't want anyone tarot reading her or
right.
divining
that was
her
kinda
without,
weird,
without her
yeah.
permission, which I found to be a very odd comment. So apparently at some point she was into that and apparently into that scene, and she's not anymore. And so she made a point of, like, I know you guys are going to cover this and talk about this, but I don't even want anyone tarot reading me or divining me without my permission. And I thought, that's such a strange comment. How do you tarot read someone without their consent anyway? I mean, I can just pull out cards, but it's like, I don't know. I don't even know what that means, really.
Yeah,
but okay.
she was really seemed to be freaked out by that. Like, yo,
it was a very strange comment.
Here's her. Well, actually, she's doing well. So 2.5 million views 6 days ago. Where have I been? And now she's back to making her beauty favorites from 1 year. Wow.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but I know she had 10 million subscribers. So now she's lost a little bit. But she's back. She just think about this. After 1 year, she's back at 2.5 million views.
Wow.
So, yeah, she's rocking it.
She sent me some views and subscribers. That'd be fine.
What are we doing that's wrong here? All right. So at the end of the day, this lawsuit was really never about Without a Crystal Ball. Shocker. It was always about Clark Swanson and Glittery Clark Swanson. And I think Clark Swanson, I think he put himself out there too much because he was going to other YouTubers. There's like videos on him going to other YouTubers saying, "Hey, I got all this information." It's like, well, and the wild part about it is that only thing they wanted Katie to do was tell him it was Clark Swanson, and eventually she gave it up. So, this is what happens when you play with the dogs. Sometimes you come up with fleas.
So maybe we'll get some more drama in the Swanson Tati suit. Maybe we'll get some more declarations. Maybe from Katie Joy or some other people. Maybe we'll get the drama relitigated.
That wouldn't surprise me, honestly.
Yeah. I don't know. That again, it's the drama is going to be crazy. But now, since we're talking about drama, we have a whole nother drama issue to talk about. Let's move to the creep. Have you guys heard about the Creepshow Art situation?
No.
Yeah.
You haven't, Kurt? All right. So Creepshow Art. Here she is. She's a YouTube channel. And essentially what's been going on is that she had about 500,000 subscribers. And unfortunately, she was she was harassing or following some other YouTuber named EmilyArtful. And I'm trying to make this long story short, but essentially, Creepshow Art's channel, which has 500,000 subs, really started off as a clone of EmilyArtful's channel, who has about 400,000 subs.
So
EmilyArtful was doing her thing, and Creepshow Art was literally taking things like her thumbnails, her titles, even like the title to one of her series. Creepshow Art like recreated it and named it the same exact thing. Like she was like almost parroting this other channel.
It's like Black Swan.
Yes, like Black Swan. Then eventually, Creepshow supposedly, again, all these are allegations. And so eventually, after this whole parroting, EmilyArtful then kind of confronts Creepshow in a couple of emails like, yo, what's going on? You damn near your emails, everything is the same. So Creepshow, I think her content started blowing up itself. Her content was good enough where, her little twist to it started becoming very popular in itself. She goes to another site called Locals. She starts, doing the whole stock account thing, promoting her own stuff. They call her out. They say, hey, this is Creepshow Art. We don't know why she's doing it because they were able to track her cookies. And then at the end of the day, EmilyArtful comes out and drops a whole bunch of receipts how Creepshow Art has been stalking her for the past 10 years. So how's this now? This goes with the T. What's her name? Creepshow Art did a video from Without a Crystal Ball that was very mean and very, Crystal Ball's the worst person on earth. So now Crystal Ball she's a victim. Creepshow Art did a video about Steve McRae. Now Steve McRae is also all of a sudden a victim. So everybody who she's done videos are total victims and knew from back in the day that she was always an evil person. So now she's lost, I think, 25% of her subscriber count. She's down to like 300,000 subscribers. That was a long story. So, what do you think happens with Creepshow Art after this? Do you think her channel is dead, or do you think she goes on? I'll pass it to you, Alita, since you know the story.
I mean, I don't know. I think there's enough intrigue that the channel's probably going to go on for a little bit longer. If there's anything that sells for these drama channels, it's centralized drama, right?
That's true.
I mean, without a crystal ball, how much did she grow with the whole Tati Westbrook lawsuit?
I'm not sure. I know she started off with like maybe 100, 120, but I'm not sure what she's at now.
Okay. Because I thought that she had added a number of subscribers through that whole controversy because people were suddenly paying attention to that specific controversy, that lawsuit. So I don't know. I mean, there's never underestimate the car accident effect, right? When you're driving down the road and you see a car accident on the other side of the road, the more gruesome it is, the slower people are gonna slow down to
rubbernecking delays.
Exactly. So there may be a certain number of people that'll rubberneck just to see what happens with her channel with this, that maybe it gives some life to it. But I don't know how many people will actually be fans of her channel though. All things considered, because it's just weird. There's just a lot of weirdness coming from there. Like I said, it's like if you've seen Black Swan, it reminds me of that, which is just strange.
I forgot the one that mentioned she faked homelessness too, allegedly. So she allegedly faked homelessness.
Yeah.
What exactly by faked?
All right. So this is what happened. So she told the fans that she was becoming homeless, and that she needed money, and fans supported her, and that she was homeless for a while. Come to find out, her and her boyfriend made the decision to go to live van life. In other words, they made the decision to give up their apartment and live like in this van life sort of way. So she was telling people that this was kind of like a compulsory homeless, like, oh, I've lost my apartment or whatever. But she had actually made the conscious choice. And the way they found out is because the boyfriend talked about it on his channel, like, hey, we're going to give up our apartment. We're going to go van life. You know, this is the decision. It's not because we ain't got money. So forth. So essentially, she faked homelessness.
But I don't understand how someone would think that people wouldn't make that connection, right? I mean, people, or maybe they thought that maybe people didn't know that they were actually dating or something. But if people know that they're connected to one another, and then one of them says, yeah, we're choosing this van life, we're not being kicked out of our home, and then the other one is like, oh no, we're homeless because we're being kicked out and we can't afford life, and like people are going to figure that out eventually. People are not that stupid.
Yeah, well, so she was living van life is something interesting. She was living van life, but it didn't work out. Now, Kurt, I know this is probably the first time you're hearing the story because you probably don't know who these people are. What do you think about the story so far?
I don't know what to think. It sounds like people who think very differently from me, and so you tell me the story, and I'm like, I don't understand it on a pretty intuitive level. So yeah, it's what I call crazy blank. It's very crazy stuff. It's insanity.
Yeah. And of course these are all allegations about this person, and we don't have any way of actually knowing or verifying whether or not these things are true. So we obviously are not putting this information out there as true because we ourselves do not know. So, in case anyone's
some people think I'm
watching
abnormal. Some people think my decisions are
listen,
all the rest of it.
Let's just make sure you know. Go to EmilyArtful's channel, watch this EmilyArtful, watch her stuff. Just type in Creepshow Art's a good person. You'll see all the millions of videos coming out to tell you she's not. It's a very simple thing to do. So these are the rumors. This is the rumors in the community, but it's interesting. And just so everybody, Creepshow has shouted myself out. She's shouted out Uncivil Law, and she shouted out. She was cool with our girl Emily D. Baker. So she's giving us all shout outs. So
okay, well maybe I'll get into it and try to figure out what's going on, and maybe try to have some sort of opinion on it.
No, she gave us shout outs when we were covering the the other case. So
Okay, well,
just so people know that yes, I've never had any problem with the woman.
let me just say
She's always
this:
been
if
fine,
you're
so.
going to ask people for money on a false pretense, that sounds like it could be fraud. There's my free legal advice for not legal advice for the day. Don't raise money on a false pretense.
Well, I don't know if she was raising money.
Because you said people were giving her money.
Yeah, I think people were giving her money because they felt sorry for her, but she wasn't like, I'm homeless, give me money. She was like, oh, I'm going through this. Okay. And people were like, okay, you know.
That might be different then.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe she stayed within the bounds of the law. Just don't do the fraud though. How about that? That's good advice.
Well, we don't forget it. We got two fundraisers. One, they did fake homelessness. They got $10,000. It was kind of like, I was like, damn, you could have gone on what's it called, on Family Feud, and won the $10,000. But faking homelessness online get you $10,000. It's amazing stuff. Now the last story that we should cover is the NCAA got their behinds kicked at the Supreme Court this time.
They just keep taking their hits.
Now,
first it was a number of states. Now it's the Supreme Court. Next up, maybe Congress. Who knows?
Essentially, they said the NCAA is violating antitrust laws. Now, just imagine they actually give this opinion. They actually give this. Kavanaugh says this within. I think it's Kavanaugh. It said in an opinion. The example is given. Let's say all the restaurants in a city says we're only going to pay our short order cooks $5 an hour. So no matter which restaurant they go to, they're only going to get $5 an hour. They can go to the best restaurants, the worst restaurants. We're all paying the same thing. Yep. So they were saying that is a violation of antitrust law because you can't have that agreement among all the people in that space that we're only going to pay. And they said essentially that's what the NCAA does. For all the student athletes, they say, well, no matter where you go, you can only get the same thing. When it comes to they were saying when it comes to internships and things of that nature, and they were saying that is a bridge too far. That type of collusion violates the Hatch Act, and each school should be allowed to offer whatever they want to offer. So now you're going to see the floodgates open because the way they're going to do it is, hey, if you're the number one quarterback in the country, we're going to give you an internship that's going to give you a brand new MacBook. That's going to be the best. It's going to pay you some good money. You're going to have the best internship on the planet. If you want to play football here.
Yeah.
So that's obviously the way it's going to go. But how do you guys feel about the ruling? I'll start with you first, Alita.
I think ultimately it's a good thing. I'm personally in favor of student athletes being able to have. I mean, I understand that the NCAA wants to preserve a level of amateurism with these with college sports, and they want to make sure that is distinct from professional sports. However, I personally think that student athletes end up putting out a lot of time and a lot of energy into their craft, and a lot of them don't end up necessarily, actually going on to go pro afterwards. Usually, they end up taking some other kind of work after college. Either because there is no professional sports league, or it's just not financially tenable for whatever it is that their goals are. But ultimately, I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for colleges to be able to provide some sort of compensation to these student athletes whose faces are being used for advertising for the school, for sometimes probably video games and whatnot. And I don't know, just overall, it's a good thing.
What's up, Kurt? To tell us how the student athletes went wrong here.
No, I think I think it makes total sense. I think it's important that the whole thing is a little bit weird because we're trying to fix a problem through the Sherman Antitrust Act.
Yeah.
Which the vehicle that we're using here is not really tailored to the situation.
Yeah,
so
true.
some of the decision that's come out is kind of funny just because we're having to interpret everything through this frame that is kind of unfortunate because there's not a better frame to use, but it's just weird. So the court basically says in so many words, yes, this is a monopoly. Yes, there's a horizontal fixing. There's some rationale behind it that might make sense because although the Sherman Antitrust Act says all contracts that restrain trade are illegal, what they really meant to say was all unreasonable contracts that don't benefit the consumer. So, 100 years later of case law, right? So the court says people like amateur sports. That's different than pro sports. There's a reason to keep it amateur. Makes sense. But what the NCAA is saying is, here's some money for undergrad, but they say, well, not so much for the grad school, not so much for the vocational school, not so much for these other things, but those are education related too. So the differentiation doesn't make sense. So, and the court goes on to write that, if you're concerned about students getting Lambos, that's easy enough to go around, and the district court still has jurisdiction to modify its order to deal with that and get around that. So, it makes sense. It doesn't give any pay to the students, but it does give them, the schools, more ability to offer more educational assets, including perhaps internships, which I'm sure will be of interest because it gives them a leg up.
But you know the internships are going to be some real big time internships, though, right?
No.
They're not going to be like if you're the star player, like, we got an internship for you at the strip club, it's going to be some great internships. So
the internship for you at McKenzie, right?
Like that.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure that's true. But what's interesting is a whole bunch of states, and I think Texas as well, have passed laws like this year to give student athletes more benefits. I believe in Texas's case, it was to their usage of their image. After graduation, name and likeness and stuff like that. So, and the NCAA, I think, itself is having either a meeting this month or next month, which was already scheduled, to try to, and now they have to deal with this and account for this. Yeah. And all the states that are kind of trying to do this too. So I don't think we're in any sense done.
Right.
The states are trying to push the NCAA in a certain direction. What would really help is if Congress wants to pass some laws. That'd be great.
I was just about to say, I think Congress is actually looking at potentially creating a federal standard on this issue.
Yeah, that would be super helpful, so that we don't have to fight this in so many different places. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see if Congress can agree on anything. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, speaking about Congress, so now, because the women's U.S. soccer team has...
Your transitions are so great, by the way, Nate. Whenever I'm like, oh, okay, on to the next one.
No, well, because we're talking about Congress. Democrats in Congress now say they will not fund the U.S. Soccer Federation because of the equal pay issue.
Oh my
So Democrats
Lord.
say they will hold up funding for U.S. soccer if equal pay is not achieved.
I'm going to beat my head against the wall so hard, Nate. So hard.
So, do you think this is right? Do you think the Democrats should withhold funding from the U.S. Soccer Federation until they pay the U.S. women's soccer team equal to the men?
No.
Right.
This is
Go
such
ahead,
a ridiculous question. I mean,
I'll
not
give it
question.
to Kurt.
Is it too?
Go ahead, Kurt. I'll give it to you.
No,
first.
it's completely ridiculous. The whole thing is so ridiculous. The women had the opportunity to get the men's deal. The court said that. They didn't want the men's deal. The men's deal came with disadvantages. No guaranteed pay, no benefits, no guaranteed play, let alone pay. No guaranteed that there would be in any competitions. And the women said, "Hey, we want some guarantees. We want guaranteed play. We want to actually play. We want guaranteed pay, despite performance. We want maternity benefits. We want dental. We want healthcare. All that stuff, and we want money."
Yeah.
Which is a perfectly reasonable posture. It's a perfectly reasonable posture. Hell, the women's deal looks pretty good. And lest I have to remind everyone, because somehow this gets lost in the mix, not only would the women have been better under the men's deal, the men would have been better under the women's deal.
Yep.
When you actually do all the math.
Yeah.
So they both would have been better off just handing each other their respective plans. And apparently they both negotiated poorly. Somehow. So it's like, we should have gone the men's deal. It's like, but you had equal opportunity to bargain.
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't have taken that deal, but then again, they should have gone your deal. So are we going to give the men more money too? The whole thing is bizarre. I want to beat my head against the wall. It makes it hurt. Please make it stop. Please make it stop hurting.
Kurt said it. I mean, it's exactly right. I mean, there is nothing under contract law standards that says that that the women's argument has any really strong merit to it at all. So the fact that Congress is then coming in and is like, oh, well, we should just make up new contract law because politics, it just doesn't make any sense to me at all whatsoever. And anyone that is not well versed on this topic, obviously Nate has a fantastic video on this issue, explaining the whole thing, laying everything down, and showing exactly how, just as Kurt said, the men would have done better with the women's deal. The women would have done better with the men's deal. The women were actually offered the men's deal during the negotiation. They turned it down because this is exactly it. When you are negotiating for any kind of an agreement, you are negotiating, to have a certain level of risk. You have greater risk, greater reward, lower risk, lower reward. That's any contractual agreement anywhere on any topic, anywhere. So in this particular case, they negotiated for lower risk, lower reward. You get what you get. You get what you contract for. You had, unless there was some sort of an argument that, there was some sort of a back end deal that they weren't offered, or they weren't, they weren't very well represented during the time of negotiation. Those are good arguments for why you shouldn't be forced to be held to a certain contract that you agreed to, right? If you were in an unequal bargaining position, for example. But there was no argument for that in this case. There was none of that. It was just, I didn't like what I got at the end of it. Once we had hindsight, which was 2020, and now I want the other deal that I had every opportunity to have and turned down. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, I mean, what exactly is sort of the end conclusion here that Congress is saying? Women shouldn't have the power to negotiate their own contracts. Women shouldn't have the ability to choose to do things because they make bad decisions? ? I mean, what exactly are we saying here about feminism? Well, women, I'm confused.
To be honest with you, I think this is a good story to tell. Because on the face of it, when you see the bonuses, you'll say, "Well, wow, the women are not getting paid the same as the men." So I think it's an easy story to tell. But as soon as you look at the details right behind the curtain, then you're saying, "Well, no, not only you got paid more than the guys. Matter of fact, and this is what the court found, right? You got not only did you get paid that, it was not equal pay because you got paid more. And then even on the back end with this whole let's switch the deals thing, it's like, no, all this just doesn't make any sense. But I think for the Democrats, let's just be honest with you. Like I said with the Republicans, sometimes we got to be honest. We got to be honest with the Democrats too. It's identity politics. Identity politics is what is running the show.
The identity politics is dumb.
Know. That's what this is. Hold on, let's just.
Identity politics is stupid. I don't like it.
This is identity politics 101. Damn the facts. Damn them.
You know what I think?
That's
what I think? I think black men and women are equally capable as anyone else, and I think that they can exercise their freedom to choose the preferences that they want to choose, and they can rise and succeed in this world just like anyone else. But apparently, according to critical race theory, this is bad or something. I don't understand it.
I'm still trying to even figure out what that is. What critical race theory? I've been hearing everybody keep saying it's a bad thing. And then I asked one guy, I'm like, can you explain this to me? What the hell is critical race theory? I don't know. I just know it's bad. What the hell? If you don't know what it is, how do you know it's bad? So I don't know.
Apparently, it's the idea that all white people, and let's be honest, white men, are responsible for all disparity that occurs. And if there's any disparity that occurs in a result, it's because of sexism. So because there is a disparity in the result, there must have been a disparity in the process. And that disparity in the process was imposed by yours truly, the white man, who is the archetype evil in this situation. With our maniacal whatever.
Did you see because there was testimony today from the general where they were pushing him around about the critical race theory, and he was saying that to him it was just like it was educating. It was like just education on past events. Like, hey, this is what happened. This is where we're going. This is where we've been. That type of thing. But I don't know. I gotta look into it more. How do you feel, Alita?
So I have have some measure of understanding of critical race theory. Maybe it's worth investigating into and maybe making a video on it. But I understand that it is basically a systemic approach of looking at not just current events, but I guess history and whatnot. I know it's highly controversial. And I think, while I think it is worthwhile to look back at history from multiple perspectives, it probably is true that the common narratives that we hear about, let's just focus on American history, right? The common narratives that we hear are probably much more often top-down narratives as opposed to grassroots narratives. And it's worthwhile to hear, different historical perspectives, of course, because we learn so much more about our history, so much more about our population, and from various demographics, and we get a much more rich and nuanced version, or understanding of our history. However, there is a certain level of angst that seems to be, or maybe not angst is maybe not the right word, but there's a certain level of maybe anger that seems to come with critical race theory, or maybe resentment, that basically, my understanding at least anyway, my understanding is that critical race theory basically says that we have certain power structures that have been put in place, and those power structures have benefited white people, and more so white males. So there's kind of like almost like this hierarchy of victimization. I don't know if that's the correct word. Well, basically,
there's definitely the intersectionality with the crossing levels of oppression.
Yeah. So the fact that this has become such a hot button topic, I don't know. I mean, we probably should have some sort of a clearly defined way of understanding exactly what critical race theory is, because it's such a big flashpoint in our culture right now, to be discussing this. But I didn't see the actual video that you talked about earlier. At least I didn't see the whole video on it. I saw a little bit of it, but I didn't focus in on what was it General Milley's statements?
Yeah. But maybe we can have a conversation, a more informed conversation about it. Because we weren't really going to bring it up. But maybe it's like you're saying, it's just time to actually look at the critical race theory and find out what the hell is it, and what do we disagree with? Because again, I feel like a dummy by saying I disagree with something I really don't know. But
exactly.
But from the things that I have heard haven't been great. But but then I hear
it's the 1619 project. It's the idea that America is fundamentally built on a structure of inherent racism and discrimination that has in no sense improved, because you hear language like this even today, that the United States is the worst it's ever been for race relations, which seems very odd, because it seems like we've improved a lot to me, that we're built on a fundamentally racist structure to our core, and that permeates all structures of society. And that there's a collective guilt that needs to be paid back, and the whole thing is garbage. And then I particularly liked it when the Smithsonian did that flyer. I'm going back a while now, but they did that flyer which said, remember that flyer? Yeah, here are traits that are white. Being on time.
Oh, wow.
It's like, here's a whole bunch of white traits. I'm like, oh, these are exclusively white traits. Oh, that's real interesting. A stable family unit. The nuclear family was whiteness. That was on the flyer. I remember that. So don't tell me my eyes are lying. I've seen what's going on.
They since retracted that, but only after there was a lot of outrage about that. So
Ta-Nehisi Coates and all that bullshit over there about white fragility.
That was D'Angelo.
That too. Yeah, her too. Yeah.
You guys gonna have me look into this thing, because don't get me wrong. To deny the racism in this country from the past. I think,
no, I don't deny the racism.
No, I'm not saying. Hold on. I'm not saying you do. But what I'm saying is that I think there's a middle ground that we're missing in the sense of, I think, and I'm just going to say for myself, I think if you're a black person in America, this is the best time to be black in America than any other time in history. right? Would you agree? Let's say the 1600s, 1700s,
I'd
1800s.
go better. I'd go
even,
one better.
Even up
that
to
if,
the 1950s, right? This is the best time to be an African American in the United States.
I think if you're African American, you can make a better than credible case that the United States is the best country to live in. Just looking at, like other countries don't have issues with racism. I mean, come on.
I'm not even saying that's not true. I'm just saying
I think you're in the best time and the best country in the world.
And I'm that's saying with that reality, it's just saying, well, just because it's the best for this time doesn't mean it can't be better, and doesn't mean because I could have said that in the 60s, right? We live in the freest country, the best time for the African Americans, but in the 60s, in the 50s under Jim Crow, so things are getting better, and I don't think we're in a race utopia, but I don't think we're in 19. I don't think we're in 1950s Jim Crow.
I don't see any gratitude. Yeah, that's the problem.
So that's the problem.
I don't see any gratitude for the steps that we've reached. I don't see where it's like you hear this rhetoric about things are the worst they've ever been. Relations are the worst they've ever been.
That's my problem too.
Voter ID is Jim Crow. I'm like, really? Did you? Do you know what Jim Crow is? Do we have to have a discussion? It's like it's the whole thing is just trash.
No, I think you're right. I think there's no acknowledgement of how far we've come, because as always we haven't gone far enough. Go ahead, Alita. I know you were trying to get aside.
No, I mean I definitely agree, Nate, that you can on the one hand, what's that?
I was just reading the chat. It said, respectfully, I think Breonna Taylor and George Floyd would like to disagree with you. Well, about Breonna Taylor, Nate would like to share some comments with you. Go ahead, Nate.
So, no, but I was going to say that, I definitely agree that you can, on the one hand, believe that now is the best time, for a particular demographic like Black Americans. And at the same time, note that there is progress that still needs to be made. There are still problems, just like you can absolutely love America and be super patriotic and say this is the best country in the world, and still recognize that while we want to be the city upon a hill, the shining city upon a hill, we're not quite there. It's still aspirational, right? Because there's a certain level of perfection that we still have not yet achieved, and that we still want to, and still should strive for. So you can still very much recognize how far we've come. To say that for Nate's experience is very different than his grandparents' experience, which is very different than his great grandparents' experience. Because if we were to ignore that, then we would be denying their lived experiences, right? And they have been through, all kinds of things themselves. Just like, Kurt's, grandparents, great grandparents, whatever, have gone through things, and mine as well, various different stories. But, at the same time, we can definitely, agree that believing that it's the best time that there has been does not necessarily mean that it is the absolute best time, and it should never, improve in certain respects.
No, I agree, but I want to also say one last thing before we get out of here, is that the United States, and maybe this is my own personal preference, but I'm going to say it anyway, the United States is the greatest goddamn country on earth. Yes. And I'm proud to be an American. I love it. It's right, baby.
USA.
And it's funny because I understand we're not popular out there, but we are the best, and we kick ass when need be, right? We kick ass when need be. So and hey, just like with your family, my whole family's not perfect, but I still love them anyway. Yeah. And I'll fight and put my life to defend it. And that's the way I feel about the country. And if that makes me a patriot, so be it. If it makes me a nationalist, so be it. But that's how I feel about America. Yeah. Go ahead, Kurt. I'll give you the last word because you were trying to get this.
No, I was just had a very random thought go through my head, and I don't want to share it because it'll put us on a different topic. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with being pro-America and in thinking that America's great, and thinking that we've done a lot to, especially since the Civil Rights Act, to end some of the systems of oppression. And when people talk about systemic racism, apologize, that was horribly mungled. Let's try that again. When people talk about systemic racism, I always wonder which systems are racist and how are they racist? Which systems? Because we used to have systems that were racist, right? We used to have things like Jim Crow. We used to have things like redlining. We used to have actual systems of slavery, for that matter. That's one hell of a system, right? So we definitely used to have things that were systems that were racist. And if you're going to say systemic racism, I'm like, okay, which systems In what ways are they racist? How are they racist? And what do we do to correct for that? Is a whole nother set of problems. But yeah, I think America is great. It doesn't mean that we can't improve, as we've always improved. It's right in our charter to make a more perfect nation, right?
Yep.
The whole sentiment is one of continuous improvement. We will never get there. We must continue to strive perpetually. I'm like, yeah, let's continue striving for forever better. And yeah, America kicks ass.
Well, on that America kicks ass note, we are going to get out of here. Thank you guys. Thanks for all the super chats today. I read all your super chats, and thank you guys for being here. This is the Wednesday show with me, Kurt, and Alita. We will hopefully see you guys next week. And we went through a lot of topics tonight. I got a lot of work to do after this, scrubbing this thing, but I think we hit them all. You guys have a great night. For Legal Bites and for Unlivable Law, don't forget to check out their channels and go subscribe. And I will see you guys next week Wednesday.
Awesome. Peace. See ya.